You're in track 3 here. This session is entitled Redefining the Good Life, How Businesses Support Community Health, Well-Being, and Resilience. So if you're here for that session, you're in the right place. My name is Kevin Bayuk, and I'm going to be moderating this session. I'm a co-founder of a worker-owned cooperative consultancy called Lift Economy. I'm also a senior research fellow at a global think tank out of Sausalito called Project DRAWDOWN. And I'm also the founder of something called the Urban Permaculture Institute. And I have the pleasure of doing some work in Marin County. Through the Urban Permaculture Institute, we've partnered with and been invited by community residents in Marin City to support their people's planning for climate adaptation. And I'm going to just set a little context as a preamble of some of my thoughts about how businesses can support community health, well-being, and resilience. And then I'm going to pass it along, and each of us are going to share a few images for a few minutes. And then we're going to actually engage at our tables with some provocative questions to have some discussion, and we'll have some Q&A in the latter half, the balance of the session, if that sounds okay. All right, so I have up here just this idea that there's something called the next economy. It's a framing that we use at the Lift Economy, that the next economy is actually happening now, and it's one that is distinct from the business as usual economy in that it works for the benefit of all life, working for the benefit of people and the benefit of planet without compromise. And there's an image that I share frequently in our work that helps me understand what's going on at this present moment. And it's an abstract symbol, but the dotted line is kind of the momentum of the business as usual economy, which I think we probably all share in an analysis that it's not working that well. If we look at the global economy and the impact it's having, and I'll reflect on that in a moment. But then there's these two other curves which I want to talk about and what's happening there and what we see happening around the world. But when I say the business as usual economy is not working, is that it tends towards the exploitation of nature and the exploitation of people. And we do probably, again, in shared analysis, not to freak anybody out or bum us all out for the afternoon with our food coma from a beautiful lunch, there's a collective set of crises in our time, globally and locally, where we have a social system where there's going to be 800 million people who will be hungry today, tomorrow. And we will have 900 million people who will have inadequate water supply and sanitation on this globe. We have an environmental crisis that has created the force majeure, a existential threat in the form of global warming and climate change. And simultaneously, we have, I think the statistic now needs to be revised, 5 white men with wealth equivalent to half the world's people. So we have an economy that has some terrific trends that are creating an outsized problem statement for us to navigate through. And what we see happening at Lift Economy is that people who are becoming aware, awake, and acknowledging these terrible outcomes are starting to take action. And some people are looking at the system that is, and they're what we call making it a little bit less bad. And I don't want to damn that with faint praise by saying less bad. Even though it's wholly inadequate, it's very important work. I was just at the SOCAP conference down in San Francisco, where I'll be returning this evening, and there's a lot of work happening in the financial world to create ESG portfolio, negative screen, just kind of still moving money in a similar way, but trying to have some type of socially and environmentally beneficial impacts with the public equities portfolios or even private investment. And that's actually really important work. And there's a number of companies and industries who are looking at the way they create their goods or deliver their services and reformatting that so that they're prioritizing better outcomes for the people and communities that they serve, as well as looking at the supply chain of their materials and trying to find better outcomes for the environment. And that's really wonderful work. And even in Marin County, there's some amazing organizations doing some of that work. Patagonia Provisions out of Sausalito, EO Products is out there, just excellent work. A lot of the B Corps, there's 2,700 B Corps in the world now that are doing business less bad. And it's very important hospice work. I'm afraid to say it's wholly inadequate to the challenge of our times. Simultaneously, there are organizations that are doing what we call midwifery work. They're reinventing the structures and norms of how business actually is owned and the practices with which it uses to deliver needed goods and services, trying to create an authentically, locally self-reliant economy that works for all without compromise. And it looks very new, and most of it's culturally invisible. And there's some of that work happening in Marin County as well. And I think that's something to celebrate and be very excited about, that there's this work of reinventing how businesses and organizations work, as well as a lot of this great less badism. I just want to celebrate that some of that's happening. There's a set of principles that we see in action. And we call these things different things. There's a lot of different terms out there to describe the different types of enterprises that are prioritizing this work. Some examples of them, maybe I'll call out one or two, maybe one that is an example. In Sherwood, Oregon, there's a farm called Our Table that my group at Lift Economy, we started a fund that we invested in. Is different than other farms, just to name a farm, in that it's one of less than a dozen farms in this country that are owned by the workers. And that's actually really important and profound if you think about it for a moment, because in agriculture, there's a tremendous amount of exploitation of labor. And to have the farm labor actually own the farm is actually a distinct structural difference. But it's not only owned by the farmers, it's also partially owned by a syndicate of neighboring producers in the Willamette area. And it's also partially owned by customers, consumers, who are participating in purchasing the produce from this 65-acre biodynamic organic farm that's vertically integrated. It has a commercial kitchen, a micro kitchen on space so that it captures all the food waste and upcycles it into meals. It also has a micro marketplace for convenience for the neighboring area to get fresh food in an accessible way. I think what's profound about it is that the owners of this farm, the producers, the workers, and the consumers all meet at one large table and break bread together a couple times a year seasonally, a few times a year seasonally, and they decide how much should the food cost? How much should the labor be paid? And they do that collaboratively, such that you can have healthy, fresh, nutrient-dense food made at accessible prices to those who need it most. And I think that's a structural difference, and we call that a midwifery type of organization. And there's a set of principles that these organizations, and I can mention a bunch of them, but I won't for time, but you can ask me about them later, that are doing this work, this different approach, and they're using an axiomatically different approach to how they build and operate and grow their enterprises. And if you want to know more about that, you can look at some of the work we do at Lift Economy. We also have a training. We call it the MBA. It's about as accredited as Trump University, but it's a different type of MBA program for people who want to learn about how to grow enterprises and businesses that prioritize wellness for communities and the earth. So I'm going to pass on the mic while I bring up the slides, and I'd like to maybe, if you could introduce yourself, Matt, that'd be wonderful.
Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Willis. I'm going to stand up. Public health officer for Marin County, so I work for the Department of Health and Human Services. I am a public servant. I have a background in internal medicine and public health. I grew up here in Marin County, spent about 30 years back east, and moved back a few years ago with my family to raise our family here in what I consider to be one of the most beautiful and potentially healthiest counties in the nation, and I'll offer some data around that. I also take the approach that, and I think for this particular conference, it's important that there is no difference or that the individual health is really inseparable from the ecological health of our community as a whole. This is the mission of the Department of Health and Human Services to promote and protect the health, well-being, self-sufficiency, and safety for all in Marin. And we take that very literally, that word for all in Marin. And one of our most important strategies and goals is to promote health equity within the county so that everyone has an opportunity to lead a healthy life. You may not realize it, but you are all part of. Are you all Marin? Who's Marin resident? Okay, yeah. So congratulations. We are part of the healthiest. Was been ranked the healthiest county in the state of California now 8 out of the last 9 years by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. County health rankings. We're ranked against about 30 different indicators of health and consistently rank at or near the top. One of the most important factors in the county health rankings is life expectancy, and there are 3,143 counties in the nation, and Marin County has been ranked healthiest or longest life expectancy by one of those metrics that's used out of the University of Oregon, with women having a life expectancy of about 85 years and men 81 years. So men are 5th out of those 3,143 counties, and women are number 1. So we have obviously objectively some of the healthiest outcomes of any county. This is the U.S. News and World Report that also ranked Marin County as the healthiest place to raise kids. This is a study that was done back in 2014. So when these sort of rankings come out, I've learned that the media are looking for someone to talk to about this and sort of understand what our special sauce is, and they'll sometimes ask me, what is our secret? What lessons have you learned about making a county healthy, and what's necessary to get there? So I think that's a question I would sort of suggest we think about together, especially when we get to the question and answer. What is that element in Marin County that contributes so reliably to health? When you fly in and out of SFO, you always have an opportunity to sort of see how unique Marin is from the sky. And this is an image that always sticks with me, which is there's obviously something special happening here. Like on the other side of the bridge, this urban, and then there's just all you see is nature. And so close. So what is it that has allowed that to occur? And how can we build on the foresight that represents? So the way I see this is that it's our turn now. We inherit a legacy of health, measurable through the county health rankings and life expectancy, visible from space when we see how much green space we have. And what can we do now to make sure that as the economy changes and as the world gets more complex, that we're still maintaining a sustainable approach to that kind of health. So this is the fundamentals that I'm looking to. First, when those questions of what makes Marin County so healthy, the first is how do we define health? The second is taking a deep look and looking into our data to understand our issues, and then innovating together. So defining health, from a public health standpoint, the most important definition, I think, comes from the World Health Organization, which is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease and infirmity. So that concept of social well-being is actually being the definition of health, I think, is important for us. And then, as the department, we're strategically promoting health equity across the county. And this is the definition of health equity: the assurance of conditions for optimal health and well-being for all people and all communities. Recognizing that the determinants of health are actually, I worked in a primary care clinic working to help people on an individual basis as they came through. One of the reasons I went into public health is I recognized that actually health happens outside of clinics, and it's in the communities that we create. And this image obviously supports that, imagining that family walking into the environment on the left versus the environment on the right. So when we have just a little bit of data, we don't see the whole answer. That might look like health equity, but it's not. Isn't that clever? Look at that. I don't know who did it. Somebody, this is Muntu Davis in Alameda County came up with that. I'm like, how did you figure that out? So this is the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation rankings. These are the areas that we score near the top in almost all the indicators, except a few kind of, and we're in the bottom half. And there's obviously a theme here, right? Any of them that relate to substance use, we score worse than most counties. And then they added, a couple of years ago, income inequality, and we are one of the least income equitable counties in the state. So why does that matter? From a health standpoint, we recognize that we have huge gaps in life expectancy within our county. We have not only some of the biggest gaps in income, but we have some of the biggest gaps in life expectancy. So that is how long an individual can be expected to live based on where they are born. And there's a 17-year difference within Marin County, Ross being at the top. And the question, I think, for us is, do we think that it's fair or sustainable to the theme of this event? Is that a sustainable approach to healthy communities, that your life expectancy would be determined by where you are born or where you live, even in a place as small as Marin County? So we have long life expectancy. One of the obvious questions is it merely affluence? Do we attribute all of our health to the fact that we are the most affluent community? Can be an argument made for that. This is basically just shows that on the bottom axis there you see income, and on the vertical axis you see life expectancy for every county in the state, and you see there's obviously a very clear correlation. But we'd like to, say that it's more than that. So I'm going to go through fast forward through some of these slides, because I think we can have more time to discuss this later. But one of the strategies that is most important for us here in Marin County relates to promoting cardiovascular health. And it's because when we look at those counties that have, those communities that have the shortest life expectancy versus those with the longest, we see the biggest difference is in the rate of premature cardiovascular death, which makes sense, right? The leading cause of death is cardiovascular disease. It's also one of the things that we can probably do most to address, because it relates to nutrition and physical activity. And so we're working to shorten the difference in or narrow that gap in life expectancy within Marin through some strategies that I think are important to the theme of this conference around sustainability. I'm just going to end with highlighting one of our initiatives. This is our Healthy Eating, Active Living, Hunger Initiative. The initiative creates systems across government and community organizations so that everyone in Marin, regardless of income, race, age, or where they live, has access to nutritious foods that promote health and well-being. And it has 3 different task forces. One is for CalFresh, so making sure people are enrolled in the food stamps who are eligible. The Food Now Task Force, which is to ensure that people who are experiencing hunger have access to food distribution sites, like food banks and that kind of thing. And then the Built Environment Task Force, which is creating policy systems and environment that support nutrition and sustainable access. And I'm going to speak a little bit about that last Built Environment Task Force. So this is one of the efforts through the Built Environment Task Force that is working in Bahia Vista, one of the communities that is at lowest income and has some of the shorter life expectancy due to premature preventable cardiovascular disease, is in the Canal area and other parts of Centerville. One of our initiatives in order to improve the nutrition, because obviously nutrition is a really important contributor to cardiovascular disease, is to work in a sustainable way to have children actually produce food on site. So we're working in Bahia Vista Elementary School to create a garden. And this is a garden that was started in 2016. And the kids are growing the food there. And now they're up to about 3,000 pounds of food, and they're growing tomatoes. This is just a pie chart of the different products that they grow. So tomatoes, cucumbers, lettuce, apples, zucchini, radishes, and other foods. And then that food goes into their own cafeteria, into their own salad bar, and 81%, this is now where the food goes. So 81% of that food goes to their own, into their own school. But they're also selling, so part of this is actually developing sort of a business model. They're selling food as well so these are establishments that we should support, because they are purchasing food from Bahia Vista Garden. Cafe Arrivederci, Vina Antico, and then they're also able to donate food to Food Now and to extrafood.org. And they're actually now able to generate, through that sale, more dollars than they're spending to get food into the cafeteria. So this is a little example of what a sustainable model. So there's an economic sustainability here. There's economic empowerment in terms of teaching children about commerce and allowing them to actually gain some profit from their work. It's also increasing the proportion of their meals that are healthy. So from a public health standpoint, it's actually improving their health. That's the physical that's the nutrition. We also have a physical activity effort that we can talk about a little more later, but it's working with our clinics to make sure that people have opportunities to gain access to our parks, and that's called Park Prescriptions. And there's some pictures of those activities in the parks. So in conclusion, individual health is inseparable from our ecologic health, and the nutrition and physical activity programs that link to marine nature are promoting both health equity and sustainability. And this is really exciting space for me as a health officer in a county that has so much in the way of natural resources and such disparities. I think we really have an opportunity to serve as a laboratory for demonstrating how we can address this issue. So thank you.
Okay, I have a lot of slides. I'm going to move very quickly as we go through this. So I'm Lon Peterson with the Marin Water District. We serve Central and Southern Marin. We've been around since 1912. We're the first municipal water district in the state. We're governed by a public electric board: Larry Bragman, Jack Gibson, Armando Quintero, Cynthia Kohler, and Larry Russell, our directors. Our mission is to manage our natural resources and provide reliable, high-quality water at a reasonable price. Anybody here know where this is? Ann, you can't answer that. You helped me get this photo. Anybody else other than Ann? Yeah, this is actually Sir Francis Drake. Yeah, so this is over by Bon Air Shopping Center by Wolf Grade, right around there. We do things a lot differently nowadays than we did. This is a picture. You guys might notice this, maybe. Probably not. 1918. This is the building of Alpine Dam. This is what it looks like today. Much different. We ask this a lot when I go talk, and we talk about stuff in relation to the water district of what business are we in? And like the obvious one is like water, duh. But really, when we think about like what business we're in at the water district, we're actually in the public health, public safety, and quality of life business. And you think about that, if minus water for 7 days as a human or a few weeks in the economy, it would become very clear what business the water district, not just ours, but water throughout the state, how important it is to the economy, public safety, and the quality of life. We also deliver a great start. So when you think about things that you do every day, you get up in the morning, you have coffee, hopefully a shower, bubbles, playtime, things like that, and also the stunning view that you guys often see, depending if you're on the backside or even I really like Matt's photo where it shows the city and then it shows Marin, and it gives like a perspective of like how incredible Marin is as a county. We deliver exceptional service 24/7, 365. If there's a problem, you can call the Marin Water District and somebody will respond very quickly. There's a lot of expertise that goes into delivering water, whether it's a ranger, chemist, a welder, engineer, scientist, you name it. There's a lot that's going on. There's 240 people that work on the water district to deliver water throughout Marin. Where does your water come from? Well, 75% of it comes from Mount Tam. The other 23% comes from Sonoma County, and then a few percent comes from recycled water throughout Marin. How do we get to water to you? So we collect, we store, we treat and deliver water. As mentioned, it comes in through Mount Tam plus some interties, 7 reservoirs, there's 3 treatment plants, and we serve 190,000 people. This is one of our lakes, Kent Lake. If you've not been there, it's really incredible. But this gives you an idea of like the quality of water that we have. It's a pesticide-free watershed. It's also openly accessible. We have 2 main treatment plants that are intermixed throughout Marin County, and depending on where you live, one of these treatment plants provides water to you. This is a very high-level schematic of our water system, which includes 911 miles of pipe, 138 storage tanks, a bunch of different pumps, and you name it. And this is just a very high level. This isn't the tentacles going into every neighborhood. But 911 miles is here halfway into Canada. So there's a lot of pipe that Marin has throughout his system to get water to the community. So maintaining that infrastructure is very expensive. Over the last 10 years, we've spent $200 million on upgrades, and I'm not going to go into each little one, but lots of money invested, lots of money that's going to be invested. Over the next 10 years, we will also spend over $200 million to reinvest into the community. So let's talk about our water. I think we have the best water in the state, and while I know Matt was talking about the health of a community, healthy water is a real big part of a healthy community. And so a lot of those communities that you saw up there actually have really good water. So I was talking to Matt about that earlier. And I'm not trying to take credit for Matt's great job in the county, but I'm just saying, seems like there's a correlation, and I really do love our water. We test our water 120,000 times a year, different variations throughout Marin County to make sure it's safe, ongoing. And then we also put out a report annually. It's the water quality report, downloadable on our website, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Water resiliency. When we talk about sustainability, it's one of the biggest things that we think about is issues in providing water. So when you look at Marin's rainfall, this is for the last 100 years since I think 1918, it goes up and down. So the middle line is what you're seeing. That's our average. 52 inches a year is what we get on average. And so as you see here, last couple of years, or there was, I think it's 16, we had quite a bit of water, 96 inches. But then the next year we had much less. But overall, collectively, because we had so much the year before, we're doing great. Currently, we have about 75% capacity in our reservoirs, and we're heading into the rainy season. How much water do we store? 26 billion gallons of water, which is about a 2-year supply. But depending on how we use that water, it could be extended to a 3-year supply and on and on. So what you're seeing here is this chart. Does it have a pointer? Well, either way, I'll just use my hand. This is the population, the green line. This is our water use, is the red line. And then here's some drought. So you can kind of see what's happening here. Tracking with population, boom, major drought, water use goes down. But after every drought, water starts trickling back up. Happens here, the recession, drought, and now we're here. And so we're trying to make sure that we don't go back up and that we maintain a lower water use, mainly for resiliency. So when we look at things that we're trying to do to ensure that Marin has water, 78, we built Sulahuli Reservoir, 81, recycled water program. We expanded Kent Dam, 1982, 1993, we had an aggressive conservation program launch. And then we also, a few different times, we've increased our capacity from Sonoma County. So this kind of a different version of it, we're kind of see as to like how we've increased our capacity starting from 1941 to where we're at now, which we have 79,000 acre feet of water. Let's talk about Mount Tam. It's one of my favorite places. I'm often there. I run a lot all around the watershed. It's 21,600 acres, 152 trails. It's one of the busiest places in the state, almost 2 million people annually, 400 animals and unique plants on the mountain. And one thing to think about is 1/3 of our water goes to habitat. Wildfire prevention is a big deal for Marin. As you just saw what happened in Sonoma, we partner with all of our local agencies to ensure that we're doing everything we can to maintain the watershed. We have 1,000 acres of fuel breaks. You're seeing that. That's in the little tan area. The blue is the lakes, and then the red is no, I got that wrong. This area is the fuel reduction zone. The pink is the fuel breaks, and then this is our lakes. So that being said, we have our own fire personnel that work on the watershed year-round. They do controlled burning and a bunch of other stuff, and partner very closely with all the other fire districts, as well as Fire Safe Marin, which works directly with homeowners to ensure that there's adequate distance from your house. This is Pine Mountain. Even recently, there was a fire on the watershed. As you can see, there's multiple engines up on that ridge. They worked with CAL FIRE as well as our fire personnel to get that put out. But it does happen. So as much as we try to prevent it, things do happen. Water conservation, big deal to us because we have a limited amount of water, as you saw earlier, and the more we can save, every drop that we save is a drop that we can use in the future. So we have options. We can either build more dams and try to get more reservoirs and different things, but ultimately we have 26 billion gallons of water, so if we save a gallon today, we can use it in the future. So it really is a big deal. The other thing is, it's a big deal to the state and everybody that lives here. There's new legislation that's been put into place. And basically what that does is it creates some targets for agencies, much like the Marin Water District, to set targets on indoor, outdoor, and water loss standards. And it gives us the flexibility to determine how best to do that, whether it's an internal water loss or an external or working in the community. And that being said, the biggest thing for us is conserving water together. It's about stewardship. So it's about partnering with the community and ensuring that everybody's conserving as much as we possibly can. So in the community, we're often in the community trying to do our part to share our story and to make sure that people are aware of our amount of water and that it's a precious resource. We have a bunch of business conservation programs. Whether you have a business, you can have us out to evaluate your water use. And there's a bunch of rebates that we offer for business. As you can see here, I won't go into every last detail. And the same for homeowner stuff, which I'll talk about. We just put out this new landscaping book. It's for both business and residential. And it really gives a great overview as to what kind of plants to use and then how to reduce your water use. Outdoor water use is the biggest use of all of our water collectively, not just for Marin, but throughout the state. Outdoor water use, absolutely huge. So residential, we give $150 for toilets and clothes washers and $50 for these other items, pool covers, mulch, rain barrels, etc. How to get in touch with the water district. So 2 minutes. I'll be done way before then. Connect with us. You can find us on the website, marinwater.org, on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Nextdoor, Instagram. Or you can sign up for one of our newsletters to keep up to date on what's going on. And that's all I got. Danny.
Thanks, Lon. I'm going to hang back here in case I need my notes. You guys are rock stars without notes. So my name's Danny, or Danielle Shiano-Messick, and I am the manager for community, worksite, and employee wellness programs with Kaiser Permanente in the Marin-Sonoma service area. So I work both internally with our employees here in our wellness programming and in the community. Kaiser partners a lot with we have a lot of community partners, and also go out to work sites, so to different companies and organizations in the area, and talk with them about how best to support their employees with worksite wellness programs. So that's what I want to touch on today. I'm going to shift gears just a little bit and talk about how we can support at work the well-being of the people that we work with every day. All right, clicker and notes and mic, so many things to think about. All right, so this is not a shock that there's this alarming trend of chronic conditions in the United States, right? So diabetes, heart disease, this isn't new information. What is happening, though, is that it's just continuing to rise. So despite our knowledge of it and our efforts to prevent it, these numbers are continuing to rise, even here in Marin County. So we are a very healthy county. We're very lucky in that way. But we still do struggle with these things. The number one thing when I go work with work sites is with their employees, the number one condition that we're looking at is obesity. And then we also have a lot of other issues like alcohol and that type of thing, like Matt said. So different things we need to think about. The reason this is so important is because chronic conditions require complex care, which is really expensive. And accounts for 86% of our healthcare costs, or something like 75 cents on the dollar. And not only are we looking at the cost, the cost of these conditions obviously is high, but these are the direct costs, but there's also indirect costs, like absenteeism, disengagement, loss of productivity, things like that. So that's another huge cost that we're looking at with our employee population that isn't well, or as well as they can be. And the majority of these conditions are either preventable or manageable. So that's why it's so important to spend time talking about these things. I think 80% of heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes are avoidable through better nutrition, physical activity, and or eliminating tobacco. So there are things that we can do. And that's where workforce health comes into the picture. Before I touch on this slide, there are things that are being done. Oftentimes, though, unfortunately, what's had to happen is that employers are shifting the cost to the employees, which becomes another stressor for the employees. We know stress isn't good for chronic conditions. So this does affect short-term costs, but it doesn't touch on the major modifiable factor, which is the health of our employees, right? So that's what we want to get at. And not only are we, we're looking at the costs, but also there is growing science that well-being drives performance. So there's been a lot of studies. There's the study up here on the right that's mentioned, HERO. I do have to look at my notes for that acronym. The Health Enhancement Research Organization found that companies with exceptional health promotion and safety programs significantly outperformed the S&P 500 index. Makes sense, right? If your employees are healthy and feeling good, they're going to have greater engagement. They're going to have higher morale. They're going to have higher retention. Think about when you don't feel well. How does that play out at work, at home, versus when you're feeling great, everything's good? Work feels different, right? So it not only affects our costs, both directly and indirectly, but the performance of our organizations as well. Okay. So we can have a big impact on the wellness of our employees. Think about how much time you spend at work and your employees spend at work, right? And unfortunately, we live in a day and age where the lines between work and life are getting a little bit blurred. And we can work almost all the time thanks to technology. So it's a little bit hard to disengage. But this is also a great opportunity. We can really make a really big impact on the health of our employees. We can encourage prevention. We can encourage making healthy choices. So this is where worksite and employee wellnesses come into play. So what affects employee health? We have environmental and social factors. So we know Marin is a great place to live. We have access to a lot of great opportunities to do things that'll bolster our health. We're going to live a long time. That being said, I know at Kaiser Permanente, so unfortunately a lot of the folks that work with us here in Marin can't live here. They can't afford to live here. So I know personally at Kaiser we have a very high commuter population, so folks that spend up to 3 hours a day in their car just getting back and forth. So these are some of the things we need to think about when we're thinking about kind of the environmental and social factors. Family history and genetics obviously plays a part, medical care. And then obviously we make the choices, our personal behaviors ultimately impact our health. And then where does the behavior change drive come from? Awareness and education. I'm always surprised, I think, because this is what I do every day and I live in this world, I'm always often surprised at how little sometimes people know, especially in Marin. I just assume everybody's healthy and educated on their health, but I'm often surprised when I talk with people about just how little information some of us have on things. So awareness and education, motivation. This is where we start to talk with folks about incentive-based programs. So that might mean like $200 in their paycheck at the end of the year if they reach certain milestones. It might be something as simple as a lunch, earning a lunch for their department or team. But those things, can really help tip that balance of ambivalence for people, sometimes that incentive. Ultimately, we know behavior change requires intrinsic motivation, but sometimes it takes that extrinsic motivator to tip the balance for people and get someone started. So that's an important thing to think about, and then also making sure that people have the skills and tools needed to make healthy choices. We as employers can have a huge impact here in regards to policy and environment. And just, again, this is where people spend a lot of their time. So making sure it's easy to make healthy decisions during that part of their day is really key. One of our biggest challenges in employee and worksite wellness is engagement. So I can sit all day long with my leadership and my health educators and come up with all sorts of great ideas we think people will love when it comes to what will make them well. But if they don't think it's a good idea or it's not important to them, it has to be important to them, they're not going to engage. So this is a picture of the version of the trans-theoretical model of the stages of change. And I have this up here because what often happens, and I'm sure you all have experienced this with wellness programming in general, is the folks who engage are these guys up on the top stairs. They're already doing it. They're already living healthy, active lifestyles. They're already making good choices. They're managing their stress pretty well. Or they're in action. They're thinking, all right, let's do it. I'm ready. I just need the support. Let's do it. So a lot of wellness programming ends up getting those same people back over and over again. And then it's like, how do we get all these other folks engaged that are down here, that are maybe just need a little more education, or maybe they're curious. So really thinking about your audience and finding out what matters to them, what they want, what they value, what's going to help them feel supported. Again, that's where the incentives can come into play too, to kind of help tip the ambivalence scale a little bit more towards action. Matt had mentioned the definition. I love the definition he shared of health, and we've certainly experienced a redefinition of wellness. And I think in a really good way. It used to be kind of just that diet and exercise. I don't even like the word diet. That's one I try to avoid using at all costs. When we talk about diet, we talk about healthy eating or nutrition. Even with weight-focused programs, it's important to talk about a healthy weight or weight management versus weight loss, because that might not be what somebody's interested in. Physical activity versus exercise, just even the words we use are very important. But wellness is no longer just those things. Now we're looking at a much more holistic approach: financial wellness, mental health, spiritual and emotional well-being, sleep, hydration, the list goes on, stress management. It's funny because when I was writing these out, it was starting to stress me out a little bit, which tells you a little bit about my personality, which is why I added the wheel, because this is a little easier for me to digest. But it's just this idea that we all have this pie or this wheel, and that's it. That's all the space we get in our lives, right? And so it's going to look different for everybody, how it's divided up, where we spend our time and energy. But the key is, what is it? Being aware of what it looks like, and then being aware of what you want and need it to look like, and then being cognizant of the disconnects there. Where is your wheel maybe broken a little bit? So that's just kind of another way to look at that. I also wanted to mention The word resiliency has been mentioned a couple times. I love this word. This is a very hot topic in the behavioral sciences and research right now. I love it because I think it's such a great spin, especially being in the medical field, it's such a great spin on burnout. So instead of talking about preventing burnout, which is kind of a negative connotation, right? Like people are getting overworked, they're getting burnout, how are we going to prevent it? It's how are we going to bolster and raise resiliency in people, right? How are we going to support their ability not to avoid problems or stressors, because those are going to happen regardless, but to be able to kind of absorb them or react to them a little bit in a healthier way, in a more well way. So I think that's a really important component of the definition, the new definition of wellness, is really focusing on and making sure that all of our programming bolsters resiliency in folks. This is just an example of our internal Kaiser employee wellness program. So our employee wellness program is called Live Well, Be Well. So you all probably know Thrive as the term for Kaiser, which we're all Kaiser members as well. So we live by Thrive as well. But internally, we market it a little bit differently so that people know that this is our way of taking care of our employees. If you see Live Well, Be Well, you know that that means this is just for you. Healthy eating, we have these 6 buckets: healthy eating, physical activity, emotional health and wellness, prevention, very big for us, healthy workplace, and healthy community. So we ask ourselves when we're thinking about our employees and our employee wellness programming, where do these things that we're planning fall? Are we reaching, are we tapping on areas in all these different buckets, or is it all about physical activity? And we ask ourselves, why are we doing it, right? Not just because we think it's a good idea or it happened to work somewhere else, but what's the data? What do our employees need? More importantly, what do they value and want? What's going to help them feel supported? And then how are we serving that up? How are we going to make sure we're really targeting those folks that are down further on that set of stairs? They're just sort of unsure and in that contemplation stage where they're thinking about it. So all those are things that we think about when we're thinking about engagement. Let's see. 2 minutes. All right. I'll wrap this up with this. This is just some drivers of wellness. One of the most important, I think, is culture. Management or leadership buy-in is crucial to the success of any wellness program. It has to come from the top down. So, and just kind of the environment that we're creating for people, positive talk, gratitude, showing, recognition, appreciation for things. It sets the stage for all these other programs, all these other well-being programs. So really focusing on having a culture of wellness. If that's not there, you can throw classes and screenings and books and videos, whatever you want at folks. But if they come back to work and there's not that underlying culture there to support it, it's just going to kind of fall flat, is what we tend to see. Also support, just, work environment that's optimized by technology and resources so that when we go to work, we can spend our time focusing on the task at hand, on the work that we're intended to do, and not with other frustrations. And then personal health and happiness, which I touched on a lot when I talked about the new definition of well-being. And again, just going back to really making sure you understand how your employees feel valued and respected and supported, what's gonna make a difference for them. I always like to mention the old adage, I'm sure we've all heard, put your own oxygen mask on first. Whenever I talk at new employee orientation for new employees to Kaiser, I always say, if you're not taking care of yourself, and then you're not going home and you don't have the energy to take care of your people, whoever you're going home to, you can't wake up the next day and take good care of our patients, let alone your coworkers and the other people that you're going to interact with every day. So this is tried and true. We have to be selfish. Unfortunately, like overworking has somehow become like this weird badge of honor, but it doesn't work. It doesn't keep us productive or make us any better at our jobs. So we really do have to think about taking the time out to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of our customers, our members, our patients, our coworkers, our employees. So congratulations to you all. You all took time out of your day. You blocked off your calendar all day. That's huge to come here. And I guarantee you'll go back more energized, right? You'll go back to work with a different, better energy tomorrow, and everyone that you come in contact will be better off for it. Okay, thanks.